Hey, Econ kids, this is Module 10. It is from Section 3 in macro. And so in this unit, you're going to look at circular flow, and we're going to show you how everything that is produced in an economy is accounted for by the government. So they will know exactly what the purchases are and exactly what is being produced so that we can kind of calculate GDP in a couple different ways. Today, there are websites out there that will show you, like the Bureau of Economic Analysis. They'll show you everything about like an economy in like the United States in terms of GDP. You can see if I click on that ba.gov link, here's your U.S. economy at a glance. It shows you in Q2 of 2020, we had negative 31.4% GDP. COVID related, obviously. And then Q3 made a nice bounce back, positive 33.4 GDP. So as you're looking at these, they give you a ton of different information in here. But the whole point is we keep track. So as you're looking at an economy, how do we know what an economy does? There's organizations out here in the government that will literally keep track of everything that's happening in your economy, so we know, hey, this is where we are as a country. When you look at it, a very simple circular flow model looks something like this. So on the bottom here, we have firms, and the firms are going to produce goods for us in terms of like the product market, right? And they're going to buy up factors of production. So now if you remember from micro, when we have like a firm, which maybe is right down here. So here's my firm. Over here, we're going to buy up, this is like the factor market over here. We're going to buy up something like labor, right? So I'm going to buy up some labor in this market. It's going to the firm, right? And you can see on that bottom one, it says factor. The factor I'm going to buy is labor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay that factor money, right? So this is your wages, you're producing labor. And then the firm is going to do what? Well, they're going to take your labor and they're going to produce goods and services. So over here, you can see in this arrow, this is my goods and services. So as they produce goods in this over here product market, that is where we as consumers are going to go buy stuff. So up here on the top, you can see this is households. And the households are going to spend money, so that's money on the inside, right, to buy up goods and services in this product market, right? So these are the things we like to buy. So we're going to buy up goods. We're going to spend money to do it. Where's that money going to go? Well, that money is going to go to the firm. And what is the firm going to do with that money? Well, the firm's going to take that money and they're going to give some of it to the factor market to get the labor, right? So in this factor market, well, you are the factor market. And what's going to happen? The firm is going to pay you a paycheck. So you get paid a paycheck here. And as a result, you will provide that labor in the factor market. So you can see the labor is going on the outside, and the money's going on the inside to the household, right? And down here, this is my firm. And you can see that the firm is using the labor to produce goods and services that then the household is using money to buy. So all this circular flow is happening. Every dollar is accounted for as we go through. Like, this is a very, very simple economy where we're just buying some sort of a factor like labor. The factor is going to produce the goods in the product market, and the thing keeps on spinning around. This one, much more complicated, but when you really look at it, we have firms on the bottom, households on the top, but all we really did was add in a couple things like the government and the rest of the world. The government also can produce goods and services. They can also consume goods and services, right? So you're going to see there's another line up there that shows like, hey, the government's going to do things like purchase things. Every time the government buys up something like a truck at Oshkosh Truck, right? That is a government purchase of a good, right? And that's going to be here in that product market. And that means that as the government consumes something like that, those purchases are included too. Now, you do have a couple things like here, the household is going to pay taxes to the government, but the government is also going to transfer some of that money back to the households. So when you think about you paying taxes, yep, that's where the government gets its revenue, so it can go buy those goods and services. At the same time, over here, the government will put some of that money back to households through things like Social Security for old people to have some cash. Right? That's just called a government transfer. It's taking your taxes and paying it back to other people who maybe have already put in their service in terms of like Social Security, etc. All right. Now on this graph or chart, one of the things you'll see is this black line here. All the stuff that goes in, all of the firms, all of the government buying things in that product market, that's going to result in GDP. This is our gross domestic product. That's all of the goods and services that are produced in an economy in a given year. Now, at the same time, we also know that the firms have to spend, right? They have to go get those factors. So this right up here, wages, profit, interest, and rent, that line that goes to the households has to match this GDP line. So these two lines in here are different ways that we can calculate out that GDP. So we'll be able to see how much money is being spent in an economy. All right. As you look at GDP, what is it? Well, it's the total value of all goods and services produced within a country in one given year. So these are final goods and services. Those services are ready for consumption. When you look at an intermediate good or an intermediate thing, those are not included. So for example, if a windshield is going to be part of a new car, that would be considered an intermediate good, and you don't double count it. Like you can't count the windshield and then count the car. But if you smash your windshield and you get a replacement windshield for your current car, that windshield, the new one, would be included in GDP. So you have to be kind of careful. Intermediate goods don't get counted. New goods do get counted. All right. So as you're looking at ways to calculate GDP, just like in our circular flow there, one of the ways is called the expenditure approach. So that's CIG plus X minus M. And sometimes you'll see like IM instead of X minus M. Basically, that's your imports minus your exports, right? That's what we're talking about, or exports minus your imports. As you look at your CIG, that C is consumption, okay? Consumption is what you and I are doing every single day. So the C is consumption. That's you and me. We are consuming goods and services. So this is consumers here. This is the biggest part of our overall GDP. The I is investment. And this investment is not like stocks and bonds. That's not part of GDP. That's not part of your economy. That's like a personal finance thing. Investment here is business investment. So if businesses decide they're going to go build another warehouse or add another machine or invest in more capital, that would be the I portion. And the last portion is G, and that is going to be government spending. So when the government decides to buy up some goods and services in an economy, that's where it comes in play. So you have consumption, investment from businesses, and government spending, and then of course your net exports, right? So what happens there? So that's your X minus M in terms of like how much is your exports minus how much imports do you have, and then you get a number there too. Okay, you can do number 2 there. That's the income approach. That's your wages, your interest, your rent, and your profit all added together. Those are pretty self-explanatory. And then the last one is a value-added approach. This one you don't see very often. I would say it's uncommon. Basically, you take that price of the item that you have minus the cost to produce. So if you're breaking down the items on how much is a pizza? Well, if a pizza is really the sum of all the different parts, then you can add it up that way too. So for example, you have to add the cheese and the tomatoes and the crust with the ingredients made, and then you add all that together to get the cost. That's what you're looking at. So in terms of the value added approach, you can do it that way too. We're not really going to focus on that. The other two, we'll do number one most of the time. Sometimes we'll look at number two just to check. Number three, rarely if ever. Okay. So when you're calculating this CIG plus X minus IM, again, this just breaks it down to what it is. So you can read that. Those are just your government, like the different types of consumption, investment, government spending, etc. If you look at this one, the bottom portion of the right side, you can see that is consumption. Okay, so when you look at that one, that is by far the biggest portion added to like the GDP overall. Okay, so consumption spending is like 70.8%, it says. Then you look at that little orange sliver, that's your investment of businesses. And the greenish part on the top, that's your government. So when you think about which one is by far the best, it is consumption. When you look at consumption, that's the one that if you stop spending in an economy, that's where the economy takes a downturn, right? Businesses, they're not really going to spend in a downturn. They're going to hold on to their money. They'll keep it. They won't invest because it's a bad time maybe to have some new investment, right? They're going to hold off. Government can help you out, but if it's consumption that we need to have continue, because if consumption doesn't happen, your economy stalls. When you look at what's included then in GDP and not included, again, what's included? Domestically produced final goods and services, including capital goods, new construction, changes in inventory. That's a big one because if you produce it in that year, even though it might go sit in a warehouse as inventory, it still counts as this year, even though it wasn't sold. What's not included? Not included are intermediate goods, talked about those already. Inputs for something else, right? That doesn't count. A transfer payment, so paying somebody Social Security, doesn't count. Used goods or secondhand sales, like anything on eBay or any of that kind of stuff, doesn't count. Stocks and bonds, not part of the economy really. That's different. That's personal and investing kind of stuff. And then foreign produced goods and services don't count either, right? Because we're looking at things that are produced in a country in a given year. When you look at what's included in GDP, we'll go over these in class. If you want to take some time to go through each of those and try to figure it out, you can. Otherwise, that's kind of the gist of this first section. It talks just about what we're keeping track of, how we're keeping track of it, and then can you really calculate it all out? And the crazy thing is we're way closer than maybe you would think, right? Because in trillions of dollars, if you can get even within a few billion here or there, it sounds like you're off by a lot, but in reality, it's really pretty close. All right. So with that being said, check these out. We'll post the answers in Classroom, or we'll go over them in class. Till next time.